Hello, and welcome to the inaugural FrieNDA podcast. My name is Mike Stout.
I'm Annie Vandermeer.
And since this is the first episode, maybe we should tell people a little bit about ourselves. Why don't you start, Annie?
Hey, I have been a designer in games of various stripes, doing writing and narrative and game things since about 2004. I've worked on AAA games, little indie games. I'm currently a narrative lead at Digimancy Entertainment, having a really great time, and I like to talk about the video game.
And so for my part, I've been doing this about 20 years now. Started on the PlayStation 2 with the Ratchet & Clank games. I also worked on the game franchise Skylanders, and probably the other most thing I'm famous for is Crash Bandicoot 4. So I've worked on a lot of different stuff, which is fun, mainly in the AAA realm. So yeah, fun.
Very much.
So this podcast, I think what you said, Annie, right, was the goal was let's just get on awesome people who are in the industry, who are our friends. And the two of us, who are friends, will speak to these friends, and we will have friendship.
Yeah.
But what about the NDA part? What is that? Is it FrieNDA? Is that the name of the...
That sounds like FrieNDA, which I also quite like.
It sounds like a soda brand, right?
FrieNDA!
Only 2 calories.
Ooh.
One for Annie, one for Mike.
I want this to be real now. I'm going to make it a thing. But FrieNDA is sort of a term that has evolved between me and my friends, where it's like, as fellow professionals in the game industry talking about something and the unique issues that come up with making games, you kind of need to give specifics for stuff, at least kind of halfway there. And FrieNDA is sort of what people have thrown down, like, this should be covered under NDA, but because we're tight, I trust you for this. It's basically like a professional pinky swear. You're not gonna run this around. This is important to our story and a shared element of trust. Like I'm not gonna immediately leap on Twitter, and because that's a party foul and a dick move across the board. But a FrieNDA also specifically saying it gives a level of like, this is important kind of stuff to it. And I'd like to sort of like, with these conversations about design and industry, to have kind of we're not going to give any spoilers for things. Sorry for those looking for it, but
we will not actually break any NDAs on the FrieNDA podcast.
Yeah. And of course, I have never actually ever broken any NDAs myself. Never at all. Ever.
That would be a direct violation of the NDA.
Yeah. It's just a term.
But the idea of a FrieNDA is people getting together to talk about stuff. Like Guillermo del Toro invites Robert Rodriguez over to give feedback on a movie, right?
Yeah.
That's FrieNDA. That's sort of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about, like, let's talk with people who have very different experiences of the industry and making games. And, like, let's talk about, like, we were just doing this in a restaurant over dinner.
I also have found that when I've talked with other people in the industry, we talk with other designers and other people and stuff on our teams all the time, but we're also kind of like, we are talking about the thing we're actively working on, and there's a different way you talk about stuff you're actively doing versus, like, the nature of the industry and a sort of like creative overlook at things and higher concept kind of stuff. And every time I get together and talk with friends in the industry where we're just sort of talking about stuff, it's fun. And I think that, like, we each have this quiet desire to like super do it because we're all happy puppies every time we get a chance to talk to each other.
So the idea is we bring in guests who have a unique perspective on things, and we have them talk about what they're working on, and we share information about stuff we've worked on in the past, or like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. I've never thought of it that way. It just gives us a chance to give you a window into what it looks like when game devs sit down and chat with each other about making games, just talking shop.
Another element that I wanted to add to it is this kind of stuck in my head too, is a thing we're going to call the justify the mechanic, which is we'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but basically there are mechanics in games that are argued about and people claim that they hate a bunch, and yet they keep coming up in games, and ostensibly they need to have some kind of use or utility, or somebody needs to like them. Otherwise, why would they be coming back so much? And having an opportunity to sort of defend them and go, this is what they're good for, hopefully gives a better understanding of the mechanic itself and maybe some ways in which it's used that we had not previously considered.
And to use that as a jumping off point for more discussions on other subjects too. But if you're thinking of something, to give you an example from another industry of what kind of thing we might want you to defend is everybody hates laugh tracks. If you ask anybody, they can't stand laugh tracks. They just want them not to be there. And yet they keep showing up, right? And if you talk to studio execs about it, they're like, yeah, people don't like it as much when we don't have the laugh track in there. And so learning about, well, why do they put this in there? What actually does it do? Let's talk about, shows that did it and shows that didn't do it and how we personally believe about it and make a cause for defending why it might actually happen. Because there isn't anything good or bad, but thinking makes it so, to quote the Bard. It's really just a matter of what is your creative agenda and how can you best use the tools available of you to complete that. And sometimes that means mechanics that need defending, or mechanics that are indefensible, but it would be really funny to watch someone try to defend.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think there's probably going to be at least one of those thrown in there for funsies. For now, it's all good times, and basically trawling through our friends list of very, very awesome people that we're lucky enough to know. Really, really cool, talented people in the game industry, and asking them a bunch of crazy questions and enjoying a conversation and sharing it all with you.
There's probably one other thing I should mention about the format of the show before we do it, and that's rule number 1. We're not going to be talking shit on anybody.
No, that's not what this is.
So if that's the kind of thing you like out of a podcast, that ain't going to happen. So this is not about dirt. This is about enjoying talking about game design.
We're having fun here. It is not to throw shade. We do that after the mics are off. Maybe! That's not what this is about.
No comment. So we could do so now let's welcome our guest that we will welcome after a cut.
I like to find out a little bit more first about what you've been playing, Mike. What's up these days?
Most recently, I've been playing a RPG on Steam called Chained Echoes. Have you heard of it?
Oh.
It's a 2D sprite-based kind of, looks like it could have been on the Super Nintendo kind of game.
Oh, nice.
It has a really interesting gimmick in the battle system where there's a bar at the top that's like a golf meter, right? Where you don't want it to be on either side. You want it to be right in the middle. Because right in the middle, you get bonuses. On the right side, you get penalties. And on the left side, you just don't get bonuses, right? So you're trying to... And every time you do something, it moves it further to the right. But it will have... Oh, but this round, if you use a magic attack, we'll move it back to the left, right? So you can... So the whole time you're doing things, you're actually encouraged to use abilities that you normally wouldn't use because, well, yeah, I won't use them, but if I use this, I'll get more time in the green zone where I get extra damage and it costs less to use my abilities and all these things. So instead of just using the one best ability on every character to do the most damage, it's actually like, oh, well, maybe I will use some of these other abilities. And then you use them and find out, oh, they're actually useful.
Yeah. Oh, dang. Right. I hadn't thought of stuff in this way, or I didn't use this spell, or what have you. That's cool. So it's not timing based. I was like, every time I see one of those bars, I'm like, shit, timing, timing.
The actual swing meter?
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
No, it's not like, that's more like Undertale style. This is, it's still very turn-based.
I do love a good turn-based. I quite do.
The story's very good. I really like the characters. It reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy VI.
Ooh.
In a really good way.
Damn, yeah.
It does have things that are frustrating about it, but I think it's very well done.
Chained Echoes.
What about you? What have you been up to, playing, that kind of stuff?
I'm still playing because I need to, when I'm playing an RPG, just extract every last little bit of juice.
Every ounce of blood.
There's a friendship thing. I want everybody to be my friend. We have to be friends. I'm playing Midnight Suns.
Oh, I've heard good things.
Supposedly this was like a flop for 2K. I got so angry I went on Twitter and I was just like, I'm disappointed and everybody didn't buy it. It's got like a free trial now, which I'm very happy about because it is really an incredibly clever game. It's one of those games that's like, somebody made the game that I wanted to make. I'd be mad, but it's so good. I mean, it is a Marvel game that draws from XCOM.
Oh.
But also all the lessons learned in XCOM, which is stuff like, you spend so much time in XCOM moving your dudes around. Just like bit by bit, level by level, and the random number generator being frustrating because, like, even at a 90%, there's still that 10% of missing.
I wouldn't get on a plane that went down one every 10 times.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That's a hell of a way to put it. Dang, yeah, in real life, the percentages that we find acceptable are infinitesimal.
Yeah, someone's like, oh, it's only a 4% chance. I'm like, that's 1 in 25. Like,
yeah. It is a sort of situation where instead of having these vast boards of like fog of war and everything, there's a bunch of tone that works for an XCOM. Wouldn't work for this kind of situation where stuff takes place in these sort of set arenas, like you were fighting on the city street, and it is all just one screen, and you hit in every attack. Like there's no, I'm not going to hit. And you will be hit too, unless you have a block or you have a resist or something like that. There are mechanics set for that. It's not
cool.
The odds of something.
Like Advance Wars, sort of. It was good that way.
Yeah, and it's a card battler. You have cards. You have a sort of, and stuff is very digestible. It's a set deck of 8 cards that you have for each character. There's a lot of mechanics, and at first it's sort of like, well, okay, wait, I need to process this a little bit better. But the game gives you the time to sort of do that. And unlike XCOMs, it is pretty forgiving. Like, not in the sense that it's easy, but in the sense that it goes, all right, there's a lot here. Let's, they'll give you time to sort of dink around with stuff in a mission before the game sort of expects you to understand stuff. And there's these things called challenges. Like, oh boy, I'm jumping ahead of myself. You can be there's a friendship mechanic where you can, of course, your character, which is the hunter, which is a sort of self-insert kind of character, which can be screwed up so badly in a lot of games where it's like, I'm me, but I'm hanging out with Wolverine, oh boy. Can be done so badly, but is good. There's a reasonable backstory for this character. There's enough flex for them that you feel involved. It's done very well. And, sadly you can't romance Wolverine. Even though sometimes it feels like he's really like, dang, Logan's hitting on me.
No one can romance Wolverine. Wolverine is unromanceable.
But everybody falls for him because it's impossible not to. But it's great voice acting. They have Steve Blum doing Wolverine. They have Yuri Lowenthal doing Spider-Man, like in that same kind of they're like, oh yeah, you did Spider-Man this other thing.
He can do everything. That guy can do everything. He's so good.
I love him to death. Yeah. It is a very funny game. It's really interesting, and the mechanics are really, really satisfying. Like, you can have a mission where the Scarlet Witch makes a bunch of enemies attack each other, and you can kick a box into a dude and smack him into Ghost Rider, who, like, finishes him off, and, you can have your person team up with another one of the 3 people that you take in, of which your character can be one, to just, like, kick the absolute shit out of Crossbones. And then you can go home and play video games with Peter Parker. It is, looking at it, it's just like all the shit I would put in a game if you gave me this license and I had the, like, skill to do it.
The relationship system especially. It's
just like, hey, XCOM and Persona and all these, it's the mental peanut butter and chocolate of all the things I like in games in this one, and it's done really well. And I just want more. So
do we have a sponsorship deal with them? Is that what...
I would love that. I would be okay with that 100%.
But we do not.
But we don't. I just think it's a really awesome game, and I want them to make more of them. Because it is... you play some of those games where you can see the sort of DNA in it and go, oh yeah, I really like that other game, but it had X problems. And it's like this game going, aha, we know, here's how we solve them, and going, ah. It's like somebody else jumping in on like a semi-sequential show and just, oh, they can enjoy this episode for what it is. But you, who have been watching since the beginning, see all these little hints and continuations and character developments that have been happening. The other person isn't penalized for not knowing it, but you feel rewarded. And that's difficult because people are far more likely to feel like they're being penalized than rewarded for something.
And remember it too, yeah.
Oh, so
They'll
much.
remember the penalty longer than the reward.
Mm-hmm. That's so much human psychology. But yeah, I honestly really love that game. It's great.
I feel like we're doing everybody a disservice by not getting to the very interesting interview that we haven't had yet.
Yes.
That we totally didn't record right before we recorded this.
Not at all. It's going to be happening. We know it's going to be great. We just have that level of faith in it. We will mention tying stuff up with a bow in a way that is prescient. Not at all inspired by
and skin filled with meat.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how I know we're going to talk about that.
It's a sense. It's this power we have.
So enjoy this interview with Xalavier. I hope that you all enjoyed as much as we enjoyed having it, because we did very much enjoy having it.
So much. He's so rad. Enjoy! Hey friends, this is host Annie cutting in really quickly to give our special guest a new intro because I giggled like an excited idiot throughout the last one. Xalavier Nelson Jr. is a BAFTA-nominated studio head, narrative director, and writer with dozens of titles under his belt, including Stranger Things VR, Hypnospace Outlaw, Reigns Beyond, Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, and El Paso Elsewhere. He also makes strides in a storytelling career outside of games, with releases such as the cult hit comic Sherlock Holmes Hunts the Mothman. And now, back to the show, like I didn't totally beef things and cover it up. Yay! Our very first FrieNDA special guest is the incomparable Xalavier Nelson Jr. of Denny's fame. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
I thought in my career I would run into, like, when Dejobon was making stuff, that their titles were the best. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, Drop That Beat Like an Ugly Baby. And, like, what's the other one? Reckless Disregard for Gravity. But then Xalavier is coming in here with titles like An Airport for Aliens Currently Being Run by Dogs, and yeah, just amazing stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for coming to our crazy podcast and letting us assault you with what will be, I hope, an entertaining question.
Thank you so much for having me. As the Dejobon example shows so clearly, I'm just deeply aware that I am standing on the shoulders of giants. People before me who said, you know what's a good name for a video game? It's 1, 2, 3, Drop That Beat Like an Ugly Baby. And we're just here to prove them right every day, a little bit at a time. Mm-hmm. That's our responsibility. It's
the pioneering spirit of titles such as Drunken Robot Pornography. It's another one.
I think probably my most provocative title was Ratchet and Clank 3 Up Your Arsenal. Which the butt jokes were strong.
You gotta. If you're gonna bring butt jokes, they need to be strong. You can't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Half-ass them. I need to go home now. Except I am home.
This is exactly the kind of amazing content you can expect from the FrieNDA podcast.
Oh, yes. This is what we're bringing to the world, and we're very excited about it. So we have this thing that I mentioned briefly before that we're calling Justify the Mechanic. Which is part of why I was like, this is great. I really love calling in creative people and then just assaulting them with a question. But mechanics in game design that people purport to hate or go ugh at every time they pop up, but they keep popping up. So ostensibly they're good for something. So we made this particular feature to be justifying that mechanic like it's good old speech and debate, except you have to speak in pro for this thing we're going to randomly throw at you, and hopefully we'll pick this thing apart and it'll become smarter as a result. Or at least have fun. And so...
In the future, we're going to do it so only one of the two of us knows the question, so that the other one also has to be on the spot. But we already didn't do that this time. So you're going to get the hardest version, probably.
Looking forward to it. Love to be an early adopter.
So today's very first Justify the Mechanic is... Unskippable cutscenes. That fun time where you have a great epic lead into a boss battle, you get immediately fucking squished by the boss, and then guess what? You gotta see all that shit again. But yeah, unskippable cutscenes. Are they awesome? Do they suck? What are they good for?
If I understand the prompt correctly, I'm supposed to defend these things, and you know what?
Yeah.
I can and I will.
Yes! That's what we want.
Before I was a game developer, I was like, these chumps, these clowns, these buffoons, why don't they just put the cutscene after? Why don't they just put the checkpoint after the cutscene? Why don't, in fact, they put checkpoints mid-fight so I can have a little juicy juice and then get right back into it? And then I started making games, and I started rising up the levels of seniority, and then I started directing games, and I realized how large of a tangle literally everything is, and how often those arbitrary limits are defined months or years before, and it's either a complete refactor or it's a thing at the core of the engine, or if you have mid-checkpoint technology, then guess what you don't get? Particle effects. The kind of absurd arbitrary things of what is hard or easy is different for every team and every project. And so when I get to one of those unskippable cutscenes, or I can't pause during a cutscene, or any frustration with a cutscene, my thoughts went from what's all going on with these jabronis to, you know what? They were probably making sure the game worked.
Yeah.
They were probably making sure experience points actually didn't overflow the counter and then kill you after you destroyed the boss. I love having conversations with people now as they tell me about like games that someone should make or their favorite game idea, because I will take something like this and I'll walk them through the thought process of like, okay, so you want to make a game about like where angels are invading Earth, right? So like, is that systemic, or is that a linear progression? If it's a linear progression, how is the player always caught up for it? If it's systemic, how do we make sure the player isn't bored? I just walk them through it, and I see
just the crushing.
Universally, their eyes just glaze over as they hit like a universe of door problems. And I'm not doing it to be an asshole. Although I'm doing it a little bit to be an asshole. It's just to sort of express that, this core, deep love and appreciation for the medium that has come from seeing all the different sides of it, getting a holistic view of the larger equation. Unskippable cutscenes are good because they remind you that life is ephemeral and you too shall die. That's my ultimate defense of them. And you know what? I'm never going to come at someone for an unskippable cutscene ever again. I've seen too much.
I love that you're like, not like, oh, okay, I'm going to run at this from like, oh, this narrative tradition of the like, or cinematic tradition of the one shot. You're like, no, I see an unskippable cutscene and I go, what suffering is behind this curtain? Because I have seen behind it and I know. I know what lies there.
We're making a game called Sunshine Shuffle right now, which is Poker Night at the Inventory meets Animal Crossing. And we are looking at releasing it early this year. We're a few months away from launch, just really, really tightening and polishing because we have unexpectedly stumbled on the immersive sim of narrative games. Never, ever make a game like this. And up until the start of this year, after 2 years in development, the characters did not hold cards in their hands consistently. We've been making a fucking card game where the characters don't hold their cards consistently. The existential nightmare associated with that, and again, how much that has brought me around to this very different view of the medium that is far less, let's say, qualitative, far less asking like, hey, is this the best solution? Or like, why didn't people do this? And far more just kind of appreciating the miracle of games existing in the first place is, that's been a really, really interesting journey. And I'm sure like Annie, you and Mike can both attest to having those exact same eye-opening experiences where you just, if anything, you might just be too tired to decide that this is worth fighting for.
Sometimes.
It's just gonna be like that. Oh God, I remember working on Dead State. I had this map I was trying to, route the player in an interesting way, but still make the layout feel like a normal human layout. So, you gotta block stuff. And I was looking through our very small array of props to do that with, and I was like, trash can, there we go. Blocked a path with it. And one of the people in early access called that block art quote insulting. And I was like, fuck you! How fucking dare you? I was insulted that they would say insulted. I changed it, of course. I put a bunch more trash cans. That I was just like, how deeply I was hurt by that stupid ass comment. Well, I mean,
I don't know. I'm a bit insulted by it right now, Annie. So.
I love that your solution was also just like another
More?
30 trash cans.
I will do more of the fucking thing. Do you really want to go around all these trash cans in a zombie outbreak? Or do you want to find a way around the mall, dude?
Imagine surviving a zombie outbreak, really rocking it, and then you die from tetanus. What?
Yeah. Just so insulting. That would be the insulting thing. It'd be like, when was your last shot? Uh-oh, you got the lockjaw. Womp, womp, womp.
Pink eye.
Oh, this would have been perfect if, with a little bit more of dev time, you have a trait for your characters that was like a tetanus shot. And that tetanus shot, its one purpose is to let you navigate past that trash can.
Now you can go over that field of rusted nails.
Now who's insulted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, yeah, I think it's at the point where I'm like, God, there are points in my career I would have killed for the equivalent of an unskippable cutscene. Because it is also it's the narrative version of those long paths in games where it's, I have to go through this narrow tunnel, or I have to crawl through this thing, and it's just like, loading! That's where loading happens! And the amount of shit that goes on behind the scenes there. And sure, we're situations with, God of War and whatnot, is very important towards this character's journey, that you feel like you never leave them, and it's this view that's locked on them, that this relationship is so important. And then it's also, we gotta fucking load stuff, man. We gotta know where the camera is. We're turning it that way because he's looking that way. Also, we're loading in all this shit behind him. And yeah, that once you see behind that curtain, and also what you were saying about explaining all those elements to somebody, there's a little bit of glee there, because people who are not in our profession, I think anytime we run across somebody who's just like, yeah, what you do is easy, it's like, well, I'll tell you what. I'll teach you a thing or two.
I saw a PC Gamer piece today that was PC gamers are getting fed up with one shitty port after another. And it's a good piece of cultural reporting. As a former journalist, I'm not going to call out journalists or journalism. I think there's something really interesting in there, though, of one of the examples cited was Gotham Knights. Gotham Knights is, among other things, a thing that takes the open world of an Arkham game and makes it co-op. And makes it drop in, drop out co-op. And by the way,
I could hear Mike's wince.
Mike,
Oh my god.
hear me out on this one. Gotham Knights, the co-op recognizes what missions you've played, and when you go back to your shard of the world and play single player, or someone joins your world, it will ask you, because you've already finished those missions, if you want to skip to the part in the story that you have past the things you've already seen before in the other world.
What?
Damn.
That's so much work.
Gotham Knights was a game where I was observing how much incredibly thoughtful work, and then as well as just like, hey, there's probably like, you can see all, as a designer, I think it's one of my favorite games I've played in recent memory, because you can see all of the edges and places where they were trying to communicate and the intention of what their game is. They call they don't let you use any of your crafted items until you return back to your base. And the reason why is so that they can tell you patrol ended and whatever else. And it's like, oh, it's not the one long night of Batman. You are playing out the fantasy of being a vigilante on a day-by-day basis. And it says you're on day 5, day 6, day 7. Gotham Knights is doing so much and has a lot riding on them. And all the normal vagaries of game development happened. And somehow this game releases and lets you play, you and your friends seamlessly play in different parts of this open city, by the way, accomplishing objectives on the same missions.
Oh my god.
What?
Why don't I have this goddamn game?
Yeah,
What's
there's a
wrong
penguin
with me?
mission that where it's like one person could be going over here doing one. You can both go to the same place and do stuff, or you can split off and be doing different objectives for the same missions and hearing the stuff and the implications of the objective being completed in a different location while you're doing the mission elsewhere.
What?
And people were like, it's 30 FPS. It's more barren than Arkham Knight, and it's like it's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
But it's comparing apples with standing desks. There's not they aren't in the same category. One is not edible. There is a massive field between most games based off your tools, your team, and what your intentions are. And I'd say, yeah, we're in this really interesting place right now where games are simultaneously living artifacts, but also branded almost irreparably from launch based off of whatever players encounter in first blush with the most complicated products our medium has ever seen. I remember when the PC version of a game might not be the same as the console or the portable versions. Yeah. And now you have Doom Eternal on a fucking Switch! And it's the same game. We live in an age of miracles.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to criticize and push our medium for our best and for doing right by our players on all platforms. But that has to be couched in a context that really recognizes the magnitude of the things that we're doing in games, because it's frankly astounding, in a lot of ways unsustainable.
Yeah.
And when you match that with an audience that for the most part isn't even given the ability to see behind the curtain and know what's going into their projects, it's no wonder people get burnt out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually brings up a really interesting question about, like, it's been a love and a desire of mine since really early days in the industry to, like, oh, people should know more about how games get made. And in 2004, when I joined the industry, that didn't exist. Trying to find that was like, I mean, that was a point where, like, everybody, Mike, remember this? When everybody was like, oh, did you see Grandma's Boy?
Oh, yeah.
I hear that's such a realistic depiction of life in the industry. And, like, even a year in could be like, oh, what's that feeling? Oh, it's your soul being slightly crushed. Get real used to that. But yeah, the only situations in which I saw anything behind the scenes was actually courtesy of a lot of the work that you did, Mike, with the behind the scenes stuff on Ratchet and Clank. Like,
yeah,
I ate that up so much. I loved it.
Because that was my second game, and over the course of the first and the second, it was just like, oh my God, nobody has any idea what this is like. Like, all of this work that goes into stuff that sometimes doesn't go in the game, or like the crazy Rube Goldberg machine, right? That is a game where it's just like, we're setting up dominoes and then figuring out why that one domino isn't falling, right? And so including like I included a museum in the game that had a whole bunch of cut content models, stuff like that, with little stories about like this is what it was, this is why it got cut, and so forth. And to me, that was just really important because if I was playing this game and I wasn't in the industry, I would want to know, oh, this is what's involved. So yeah, I love the idea of introducing more to audiences like what game development is and what kind of constraints, create the end product. Mm. Like there was one game I was working on where we knew from the beginning it would be very important to be able to quickly replay levels. And we had put a bunch of time and thought into it. But then when it just came to loading the levels, at the end of development, it was like, oh, wow, these are taking a long time. Can we do anything about it? And the answer was no. So we could reset the levels instantly. But when you first loaded them in, they would take forever. Oh. And it was like, okay, so we got half of what we wanted. But by the time we figured that out, it was far too late to do anything about the loading system, right? So yeah, it's just this interesting, there's always give and take in all of it. And then sometimes you run up against a restriction you can't get past and you have to come up with the best solution. And maybe that's an unskippable cutscene. But I think there's other things to praise perhaps about unskippable cutscenes and certainly things to condemn.
Yeah.
Like I was playing Kingdom Hearts 2 back when it came out and a cutscene started. So I ordered a pizza and the pizza got there before the cutscene ended.
Oh my God.
It was amazing. It was a really long cutscene and unskippable. And at that point, I was very angry, right? I'm not the kind of person who wants to watch the cutscenes more than play the game. But recently, when I played God of War, I had the exact opposite experience, where every time the combat would start, I'd be like, I was having a moment with my son, man.
How
and
dare.
then you came in and forced me to fight? This is not cool, And it's very odd how just two different games with two ways of telling the story made me feel completely differently about it. In one context, it was, oh man, the pizza got here before this thing was done. And the other end, it was this deep attachment to what they were trying to tell me that seemed somewhat at odds with what they were trying to get me to do.
Do you think that's also part of that is our good old friend ludonarrative dissonance? Oh,
yes.
That scamp.
I've heard that's what it's called. Yeah. When the game tells you to do something and the story tells you to do a different thing, like, hey, hurry, we have to save this person. Hurry, 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 hurry. Also, there's 100 chests between you and this person that you need to loot, but hurry, hurry.
Ooh, those berries are helpful. Maybe that scrap of wood over there could be useful. Get that shit too, but hurry.
Hurry. Yeah.
Yeah. Hurry up and wait.
The worst thing is when, this is like the early 2010s, late 2000s. You would have those hurries and so on and so forth, but it would be combined with games that had collectibles. So like a Call of Duty campaign is like a roller coaster. Meanwhile, every level has one or multiple collectibles. So I remember playing Modern Warfare 2 and being like, wait, there's collectibles here? Or like BioShock Infinite having this, breathless pacing. And then I'm, meanwhile, making sure to duck and down whatever door that I think, the roulette of like what thing is going to advance the plot, try to duck down the alternate paths so I don't miss an audio log or a collectible thing or just a piece of gold on the floor of a racist town. And
welcome to racist town.
One of the things that I've been most glad to see is I don't know if this new Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 has any collectibles mid-mission. And if that is indeed the case, that's amazing because I'm not thinking as a player, speaking of ludonarrative dissonance, I don't have to separate my game player / completionist brain from my in-game character brain because I'm pretty sure that my in-game character isn't thinking about how much XP he's getting for defending his son. God of War Ragnarok has this thing too. It's better about it, but it also has the thing of like, boy, we'll move on now. And then I just like steer, do a U-turn, making my raft go to be like, we miss a chessboard.
And even in moments where you have like Atreus be like, "What are we doing over here?" and like having the. I haven't gotten to Ragnarok yet, but have moments in the original where he's fussing around and Atreus is like, "You just said we had to leave," and he's like, "We need to gather supplies." I'm like, they actually had to put in extra dialogue to be like, "And this is why you're doing this shit." It's neat. I like that it's there, that they have moments where Atreus is like, "The fuck did you just said?"
That's kind of interesting because it's one of the things about Ragnarok that I found very interesting was all of the decisions that they made that I didn't like often were this weird way of making me feel a certain way. And I didn't know whether I enjoyed that they manipulated me or whether I was upset that they were doing something I didn't like, right? Like, just, for example, the whole story, I'm not going to get into specifics or spoilers, but the theme of it is, are we predestined or do we have choices? And the game has no choices at all, right? Like, it's completely linear. You as the player are not necessarily choosing whether or not they change and so forth, right? But the fact that it's linear is also kind of the point, because the story is telling you they're constrained by their nature. So I didn't know whether I thought the fact that I couldn't do anything to change it was bad because I couldn't do anything to change it, or good because that was the whole conflict in the story, right? Is, can these characters change despite the fact that Kratos does a thing? He kills gods, right? It's predictable, you know? Maybe his fate is sealed. So there was a bunch of stuff in that where I kind of, on the one hand, I was like, oh, this seems like it's counterproductive. And on the other hand, I'm like, oh, I don't know though, because I'm kind of into it. So
yeah, like, have we entered into the modern? Is this the modern manifestation of designer logic? Of like, well, you have to think like a designer does in order to solve this, because that was thrown at. This is why adventure games died, is designer logic. These weird ass puzzles. Now it's like, it's not the only way forward, because I think a good designer is trained to be like, you need to think like a player. But then when it comes to other shit like collectible, we put stuff in ways that it's just like, oh, well, this are weird sort of, I don't know if it gets taught directly. I don't know where it comes from, but there's a particular flavor of designer logic that starts getting layered onto how we think, and I see it reflected in other games where it's like, I know I didn't know anybody who worked on that. It's not like I somehow transmitted how I think to them. Mike, what was your example? You mentioned this once, and I'm like, shit, what was your example? Because it was perfect.
Well, my favorite one is I was playing GTA, one of the GTAs, and I was in trouble, and I was talking out loud, and my spouse was listening, and I was like, okay, if I were designing this, where would I put a health crate? And I ran to the exact point where I thought there'd be a health crate, and there was. And they were so amazed, right? Like I'd done a magic trick. And I'm like, well, this is where you'd put it, because it's a little, alcove in this place. And I was explaining it, but, I sort of knew. And is that what the story you were looking for?
Yeah, that was 100%. I was thinking of that, and also like, where's our designer logic for collectibles? Exactly where that spot in Bioshock where it's like, I feel like it should be over here. Like I would put stuff over here, because other games have taught me to like take an about face and run. Oh, it's a suspicious looking hallway that is off the main path. You've got to put something at the end of that shit. Just like if there's a waterfall in your game and you don't put something behind the waterfall, everybody on the fucking internet will get mad at you. Like, you failed.
So remember how I was talking earlier about how being deeply considerate of the miracles that are happening in games has given me an appreciation that I didn't used to have for all kinds of things that used to be bugbears. That doesn't extend to waterfalls. If you don't put anything behind the waterfall, you're a fucking lazy designer. Yeah. And the game isn't good.
With this one action, sir, you have condemned your game to the refuse pile. Just put fucking something behind there. Just make it a note that's like, sorry, this chest has already been looted, or like, coming soon, a chest of wonders. Dang. Then the player would go back. If time passed in the game, they would go back there. And now I'm like, shit, do I need to make a game that's just like about this waterfall?
You call it IOU.
Yeah.
Right? And you just leave little notes around.
Going back. Isn't that Dark Souls, basically?
something that you were mentioning about going, if there's a hallway there, you have to put something at the end of it, feeding in with the idea of the complicatedness of making games. Sometimes you've got a level and it's built, right? And that, like, it's not getting unbuilt. And there's a hallway that doesn't mean anything, that is in the middle of your I want to go straight ahead space. And so for you to make them not get confused about why that hallway's there, you have to put a collectible there, right? Because otherwise they go down the hallway and they're like, okay, I'm not figuring out something about this hallway. I need to start shooting all the walls. I need to start looking for buttons, right? And it's not every time, but if you go down that hallway and there's nothing there, you're either confused or sad. And, as the designer, you don't necessarily always get to control that, which is sort of an interesting addendum.
I think that, like, that in a similar vein, the idea of scope creep for vestigial elements of a game is so interesting. So I was playing Borderlands 3, which is a fantastic experience, and the DLCs in particular are real standouts. And the main game bears scars. And at one point, I hit a side mission that ended up taking me through, like, an entire other region of the game that the main path didn't touch at all. And I asked a friend of mine, I was like, hey, that used to be on the main path, didn't it? He was like, yeah. and that kind of, like, when you go through the journey of making a game, having the empty hallways that you have to fill with loot, even though it doesn't make sense, and you have to figure out how to balance that with the economy, and now your economy is unbalanced because it's made for the main path and not for the weird vestigial hallways you have to use to cover it up, or still having the content in the game, but you have to bury it in a side path or find something to use that space because, God, having 20 environment artists and 2 designers and a combat encounter person set up this space over the space of 3 months. That costs a lot of money. Yeah.
Boy, howdy.
And it's not just that, it's not just that there are mistakes. Sometimes you have to make a decision about what's important or not, right? And that might mean that, something is less. Like, it's very important that I'm trying to figure out what constraint might have made you take an entire critical path segment and turn it into an optional path segment. But I mean, I've done that in games before. So like, sometimes it's just like, maybe this piece of content is much more difficult than we thought it would be, or it's much less compelling than we thought it would be, but it's good still. And we want it, but it doesn't fit in the critical path, right? Let's make that decision. Like, sometimes it's really just, you have to prioritize what's important because you can't necessarily do everything. You don't have an infinite amount of time or people or money. So you have to constantly be thinking about, okay, what's the most important thing here? And sometimes the most important thing isn't the 100% coolest thing,
Game development being like a constant state of triage. I love seeing behind the scenes and everything, but there's so much that happens behind the scenes that's like, do we really want to... I want players to know more about how games get made. I've whined a lot of times that out of any hobby or passion that people have, like, I'm an audiophile, I love music, or I really love films and the practice of filmmaking and everything. Somebody can be a massive fan of games, and the ability that they have to learn about how games get made, or the average sort of understanding that exists for people who ostensibly love games, is like, it's so small. And I think to a certain degree we made our own bed as the industry on that one, because it took so long for us to open up about, how the sausage is made, and podcasts like this one and incredible documentarians like No Clip and 2-Player Productions and stuff. Like, their stuff there is really awesome, but like, it's happened so late that I think that a lot of people have it in their heads about, like, no, things just get made. They run with an assumption and they never take any steps to correct themselves on it. I think because a lot of times we don't even tell them that the correction is there. And I think, well, okay, I'd really like to educate people on how games get made, but then that also means they have to see this shit behind the scenes we are not proud of. Or like when they dig into the files in a game and go like, oh my god, there was this whole section, like what the heck happened, and feeling like they were robbed somehow, going, no, how do we communicate to you that that whole area was a clusterfuck? We went into it with every good intention in our heart, and it did not work. To the point where it's also like trying, well, why don't you take it out then? Like, well, we kind of tried, but it's so tangled in with everything else. Sometimes it's better to just smoosh it in a corner and cover it with an unskippable cutscene.
And that's one of my favorite things about unskippable cutscenes is because sometimes you can see what resources a team has, right? Because a studio has a certain focus or a certain thing that they are built to produce best. So if a studio has a cinematic department with free cycles or is designer starved or level designer starved, it's like, ugh, we can assign animators to make a cutscene that moves you through a completed space that we could not fill with gameplay, or just transitions you to the next point. Alternatively, you might have a game where the middle bit, you're like, there's almost no cutscenes at all. And it isn't because they've recognized that you're so good as a player that you can just take on any challenge that comes along. You don't need cutscenes anymore. It's because they didn't have the budget for it, and they had to focus on their end cutscenes, the beginning cutscenes, and the high priority ones. And maybe they had to hit a certain hour length, and so in the middle, they just start tossing in levels because they had level designers. That is the thing that I love most about any sort of thing dealing with like the background of creativity, which is when you learn that about a movie, the perspective of the people behind it, the configuration of the people behind it, and how it results in the finished product, that is somehow an even thornier and more complex thing in video games. But as soon as you see even just a little bit of it, one, you can, like Mike, start to predict, where are the health crates? Where are the cutscenes? Who is the man behind the curtain? You can see it now. And the second great thing is, outside of the benefits to your meta power gaming, is you can really get this immense appreciation, start to make predictions that are correct of like, oh, this is where the budget ran out. This is where a voice actor who had a certain amount of time booked, but they got picked up for a different project, or there's a scheduling and availability, so that character got killed off real quick. That it feels like magic to get that sort of insight and to feel like you're interacting asynchronously with the voices behind the game. And the fact that we don't have this already speaks to the same reason that we are finding it hard to hire seniors right now, which is institutional sins of our medium. At a certain point, it benefited us to say, blast processing. And then the kids don't question it. They just go like, my console's better because it has blast processing. And when obfuscation no longer benefits you, as we certainly are in a place now, we can't just reverse that. There's going to be pain in doing so. Just like if we want to have seniors in another 10 years, we need to start hiring juniors now. And we aren't.
No. Yeah, it's a sort of situation where we've done so much to like just get by. Our thinking down the line is sort of like, we're just going to get this game out. And then games as a service is like forcing us to think in the future, but in maybe not a great way.
I mean, among other things, games as a service is interesting in the sense that there has been no cultural reckoning with the possibility of losing what a game is in the process. What No Man's Sky has transformed like 6 times over the past, it's been 7 years.
Ooh.
So No Man's Sky has transformed like a dozen times in the space since it launched, which means the other versions of what it is are dead, no longer accessible. And we are not, as much as it continues to make bonkers amounts of money, we don't know how many players it has lost forever.
Yeah.
When Rainbow Six Siege, a hero-based tactical shooter, it now has, how many are there? There's 65. 65 heroes in your hero shooter. That is an amount at which new players coming in are overwhelmed. Old players will eventually either fall off or never return. And as much as we're continuing to sell copies of Rainbow Six Siege, we don't know who's never coming back. We don't have data, and to a degree, we aren't collecting it. And I think constantly about the fact that you wouldn't say that a movie, if you patched The Godfather to get another half hour of footage, that doesn't necessarily make it better. Games also have a threshold of what they can existentially contain. And if you have a really successful game, you are disincentivized from confronting that, which means we have projects that you can kind of say side-eye and go, ooh, that game is too big. That game is no longer a single focused statement. It is a machine for profitability. And that's fine if it's just meant to be a machine for profitability, right? There's nothing wrong with making money or taking care of people. But it also is grim in the sense that anyone who makes a successful game is looking down the barrel of fill the skin with meat until its shape is unrecognizable. Or leave potentially a studio saving amount of money on the table.
And if you're anything else that's coming out in that genre against something that has been around for a really long time, trying to get players to your thing is exponentially harder, because we've trained players to look at stuff not in terms of some sort of creative value or experience, but just how much shit is there for me to do. If that's the barometer that we have, that people look at as for like quality of a game, we have put ourselves into a losing battle where like the stuff that's been around the longest, no matter like the relative quality of the stuff in it, if there's just more stuff, it is now better. And so anything else trying to come out in that market, no matter how rad that may be, if they're trying to also, if we internally are measuring the like success of a game on, oh, okay, what's the player count of the other part in the market? Like, you're not gonna get those numbers right out the gate. You're not. It's impossible. To have those kind of expectations is like, all of the shit is so broken. It's so broken.
Streaming is confronting that right now too, where because we've seen the wild success a streaming show can have, if you don't have that wild success, they cut you out and like, you know, push it out into the river, light the burning arrow, set it on fire. Meanwhile, we look at a lot of the shows that people are now returning to for comfort viewing now, and The Office took 1, 2, 3 seasons to really hit its stride. You can see that for a lot of the classics, as much as there's value on those early seasons as well. You don't get a chance to be a slow burner, except in very specific circumstances. And that is why I care so much about, with my studio Strange Scaffold, just positioning us differently, budgeting differently, creating a different... When you change your process, you change the products that you make and the products that you can make. And by building different materials and structures and machines, I'm hoping that Strange Scaffold has an opportunity to, you know, also just make games that you can't really justify otherwise. I don't know if EA could justify, even with the massive amount of money that they get in from all their other different endeavors, even taking a small Splinter team and making an airport for aliens currently run by dogs. Let's say it got greenlit. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But Strange Scaffold can build that game, and it's why I care so deeply about other people having the opportunity to start a studio journey or get a game project funded on this basis of calculating what it is they are going to be best at building with the machine that they're setting up. If they're a gameplay-focused studio, not having a whole bunch of cutscenes. If they're a cutscene-focused studio, having something that takes advantage of who they are and what they are. I feel like there's a lot of natural expression and very individualistic expression within the boundaries of what game development is that a lot of other mediums don't have, that we haven't even scratched the surface of exploring because it hasn't made sense to yet. We're making just enough money that the money that we're losing or that's on the table or the people who are getting burnt out aren't necessarily apparent.
Towards that point of like being caught in this sort of untenable situation where, you know, to make X new type of game, you're expected to have an unreasonable amount of sales. Or, oh, cool, you've got a successful game. Now you have to make that forever. Have fun. And the sort of the burnout that can cause, the environment that can do, like, it's harmful too for you as a developer, because you can get very good at that one thing. And if you want to do anything else, oh shit, like you have to start from a junior level or you just don't know where to go. And I've seen that happen a lot. And one of the things that I really love is, and yeah, I think that's put perfectly, like, indie studios, part of the awesomeness, the thing that they can give the industry that nobody else can is experimentation on a level that's just not possible. One of the things I love too is, and weirdly enough, you see like big studios do this all the time, is co-development. Because, you know, Ubi has a bajillion studios, and they're like, well, I'm going to bring in this person to work on this and whatnot. And stuff like that is done for usually, like, and this is my ignorant opinion on this, like, for headcount. Just, we need to get, yeah, we have a skin, we need to fill it with meat. Perfect thing. And doing that consciously, building towards a sense of like, well, we want to make a different type of game. We want to make this thing in this genre that we're not familiar with, or we want to make something that has a bit more of an artistic swing than our last one. We just don't have that many artists. And trying to lean away from, well, if we hire a bunch of people, we want to take care of them, but it puts our studio in a financially untenable position. Like, we're all at risk there. And if we hire a bunch of contractors, then that's not really doing these people justice. Good job, you've got a lot of incredibly creative people, and they made something great. Now, fuck off, bye. You can't keep them on. And having something where it is like co-development, where you get two studios that are both excited about a project and work well together. Or even a kind of situation where you have a publisher, an indie publisher that's like, I believe in what you're doing, and I want to give you the sort of resources to grow in this kind of way. Is like, those are so much, you benefit so much from that kind of a healthy partnership. And for me, when you're in it, you can see how valuable it is, but it's like talking to people about like something that on the higher level looks so uninteresting, like soil health or something like that. It's so critical to getting anything to grow. It benefits on such a larger level, but if, you know, that'll get people to sort of shut down really quickly and be like, they just want to know the output. But yeah, knowing how exciting that is, knowing the sort of possibilities there and seeing it, like actually sitting down and seeing what certain studios are coming out with is so exciting.
The current state of my exhaustion is because we say we are a young medium until it comes time to talk about how we produce our video games. It's like, hey, we don't got all that many women, don't got all that many black people. There's still some harassment going on. Yeah, we go into development hell pretty often, really often, as we hit quadruple A scale. We're a young medium, guys. But don't ask us to change a milestone schedule. A milestone schedule is the exact way it makes sense to structure the funding arrangement of a video game.
This is the only thing that works. Don't question it. It's sacrosanct.
we if we want animation, we have to build a studio internally. We can't co-develop. We can't have an outsourcing studio or this kind of mixture of studio and IP to make things happen. We would love to be like film, but we will not learn anything from film or from music, the industries that we want to reach the cultural legitimacy from, yes, because we're insecure.
Oh, God. So much insecurity. Holy shit. That's like that's it. You found it. The secret word.
So I'm very aware of the privilege of my position right now, where because I didn't get the opportunity to work for a studio or get on the ground floor of people caring about black people in the wake of Ferguson. I've been put in the position to continue to be independent and work on an immense number of projects and not just do work, but be visible in doing the work and have people seem to like the work. And with that in mind, the range of offers has been really interesting in the past couple years. And quite a few of them have been paths outside of video games. What if I stepped away from the circus? And the reason why I'm staying here right now is because I believe right now we have this opportunity to speak not for a better future for video games, but for a better present. All of the ingredients are in place in terms of our... I'm a biz dev and cultural history nerd. We're in the equivalent of where 90s cinema was, where you had this huge range of films at both, blockbuster tentpoles, and like a Kevin Smith movie could make $300 million off of a $3 million budget, $2 million budget. It is in that environment that I see a lot of the industry instead just choosing to make the equivalent of Marvel movies. The largest productions you can to get the highest resources available, even though film and music and literature are all turning their eyes towards games, because the distribution resources that we have available, the fact that people are willing to buy original IP from people that they've never heard before in video games, the field is, to use a little bit of biblical language, ripe for the harvest. It is a uniquely possible in video games to make them quickly and efficiently and profitably and with a sense of originality and with real sustainability driving all of that growth and movement. And so people are swarming towards us in droves, especially the film industry, because they're seeing reality collapse in their own mediums. And I feel like games doesn't grasp right now what it has, at least on a wider cultural level. So having both been by choice as well as by fortune put in a position to right now have some sort of a voice, I'm saying no. Strange Scaffold isn't making the one definitive video game. There is not a single Xalavier Nelson Jr. game that is going to change the medium and be the everlasting light that represents the legacy of my career or the next 3 sequels or the game that I work on for the next decade. I'm not selling you one game, I'm selling you 5. I'm giving you a journey that you can follow the same way you would follow your same director, your favorite director or musician. I'm going to give you shit that you hate. Because if I'm making stuff that has a statement of intent strong enough for you to hate it, I'm also going to make stuff that you love. Stuff that respects you and cares about you coming in and is excited to present to you not just this vision, but whatever comes next. And this combination of philosophical factors means that, yeah, we have revealed this supernatural throwback third-person shooter, Max Payne's spiritual successor called El Paso Elsewhere, which places you in the shoes of a black monster hunter on a doomed journey to the end of an extra-dimensional void to kill the monster that he loved. We have Sunshine Shuffle, an adorable game about animals on a little boat in the middle of the ocean playing poker with you because they robbed a bank 12 years ago. And they're letting you decorate their boat, and they're telling you how and why they did the big heist so that they don't get executed by the mafia. Exclusive little reveal for the FrieNDA podcast. I was making a joke on Twitter about how, we're making a survival horror match 3 game. Yeah, that isn't a fucking joke. We're doing that.
Amazing.
Hell yes.
I made a joke last year where I was like, I'm going to make a game that's the Oblivion Persuasion mini wheel game. I'm going to make the Oblivion Persuasion mini wheel game. At this point, you should know I'm never fucking joking. I am Schrodinger's game developer. Every game is both simultaneously not being developed and being developed by me. We have 6 games in development, 2 of which we publicly revealed, 2 of which I've teased on this podcast, and 2 more that people know nothing about at all, and 3 in pre-production that we know exactly what we're making, how we're making them. It's just we're finishing some other stuff first. And God, I wake up happy. I wake up every day feeling like I was built to do this because I spent years in my career freelancing and contracting and working with different people. I have over 70 projects underneath my belt now. And I was always saying, what am I good at? what do I care about? How can I best take care of people? What are my weaknesses so I can create structures and supports that address those, either for myself or for the people around me? I'm trying to revolutionize the production of what video games can in my little slice of the world, not to be an example in exact form, but saying anyone can do this. Anyone can build different structures and machines. It's a matter of changing the way we think about the production of video games, because we're going to get our act together eventually. We're just going to lose a lot of money and time and people along the way. And I'm, again, in my little arena, trying to exuberantly express just how much is possible within a medium that simultaneously says that it is young and also that it has everything figured out.
As someone who's spent their whole career in the studios, right? Like, that's incredibly inspiring. I've always had this nagging suspicion, right? Like, we could make games for cheaper. We could make them more targeted. We can have a singular idea that they're based around and not necessarily need them to be 40 hours and $60, right? But the systems aren't set up. The machinery isn't set up to make things like that the way it's working. And so it's very inspiring and hope-inducing, I think, that people are doing these experiments and that they're working out very well.
Yeah, it is something that is supported by industry and players. I couldn't do it without people helping me pay my bills within capitalism. But yeah, I want everyone to have the ability to really explore the creative potential within them that I have ended up having and that I provide to the people who work with Strange Scaffold as, a alternative structure that they contribute to while maintaining their day job and their overall perspective and sources of support as we all just try to get by. The humbling experience of watching people who have made the largest video games on the planet start a studio and then deal with development hell, and it's like they're a first year dev again, all over again. If that doesn't tell you that we need to give people the opportunity to learn in more spaces and work on more games and express more things and fuck up, then nothing else will. Because what I see when I was looking at the From Software catalog a couple days ago. I'm playing Kingsfield for the first time. I died to a Kraken in 30 seconds. And then I found that the PS1 judder was covering up a small bit of writing on the wall right in front of Spawn that says Kraken ahead. The amount of games, if you just go to the From Software Wikipedia page, that From Software put out in the first 10 years of their company's life, literally, is about double the amount that they've put out since, if not more. I'm not going to valorize the PS2 era of development, especially to people who were there for it. But hot damn, if you just didn't see people get to make things that were straight up broken and wrong and flawed, and then move on if their studio survived long enough. Games is a graveyard of half-assembled, intriguing ideas that just because the game they were in didn't necessarily hit platinum hits level, nothing ever pulled from them. I am so excited by the potential that everyone has right now, and that I see people pursuing in things like Gotham Knights, in AAA and in indie, in the spaces that people have. We are trying to give our players and ourselves better worlds. And my hope is to be able to continue to make my own particular worlds for as long as humanly possible. Because now that I've experienced this, I can't imagine giving it up.
That puts a great bow on it.
Oh my god, the best bow. Like when you're trying to tie a bow on a package and you're like, why is it acting all weird? But then you get it perfectly and you're like, oh my god, poetry.
I love tying bows so much. I should go into stationery.
But yeah, oh my gosh. I almost hate to I've got to lean into the bow, but it's been so awesome talking with you, and thank you so much, Xalavier, for being on our crazy Crazy podcast.
We've mentioned a few of the games that you've got that are coming out recently, but do you want to plug them before we're done?
Sure, yeah. Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, one of our previous titles, is getting a big update soon where you can essentially erase the universe itself and find yourself grasping among its broken shards. So that's fun. We have, a back catalog of games that you can play on Steam, Switch, and Xbox under the name Strange Scaffold. We have Sunshine Shuffle on the horizon in the very near future. You can wishlist on that on Steam now. We have an exciting update coming for that soon, which may or may not be additional platforms, so keep your eye out for that. And finally, the big news that I can talk about for now, at least this year, is El Paso Elsewhere. And we're going to have announcements around that in the near future. It is a bombastic, full-fat experience with a original horror hip-hop concept album accompanying your slow-mo action. You can not just dive, you can jump and then dive off of walls. So you can chain your dives as you fight supernatural creatures in a dimension-shifting motel that takes you from places to claustrophobic meat lockers to burning Victorian manors. Strange Scaffold is full of exciting things on the horizon that you can wishlist and buy, and we're excited to take you on the journey and to hear how you feel about all of it, because worst case scenario, you hate it, and we've got something that you will love in the next 9 months.
Awesome. Where can the people find you on ye internets?
You can find the studio at Strange Scaffold on Instagram and on Twitter. You can find me at Rit Nelson on Twitter and on TikTok. I'm also on Instagram, but very, 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 very little. Mainly to communicate with my little sister, who will only send me Instagram reels, and we have little other forms of communication.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
This has been really awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to our very inaugural, that's the I word I was looking for, podcast of FrieNDA. We promise we'll get better at this.
I promise nothing.
I'm making this more complicated than it should be.
Low expectations.
But I hope you had fun, or at least even a little bit as much fun listening to it.
As we did.
Thank you guys so much. Join us next Bat Time, Bat Channel, or whatever way in which we posted this and you're choosing to consume it. Bye!
Great to see ya. That sounded terrible.